Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Trades Talk. Today we have a super fun episode. It is with Helani Ellis of Exceptional Admins. We dive into the world of EAs, executive assistants, and what that means to unlock time for you as a professional, as an executive. And if you are an assistant or an admin type of a person in that role, Helani gives a ton of great detail and takeaways for you to take your career to the next level, help your executive achieve more. Unfortunately, Maggie wasn't able to make it today, so I'm solo. However, I think it still worked out really well. Definitely missed her. She'll be back for our next episode. But a couple big things I want to dive into before we open up the episode is first and foremost, grab a pen and paper. There are so many great nuggets, so many great quotes that Helani shares. It really is one of those episodes you're going to want to listen to twice. And then a big one here is really come in with an open mind. No matter the size of your business, Helani actually shares the idea that her first hire in building her business was her executive assistant, which means she hired an EA when she had a team of one. So whether you have 5, 10, 20 employees, 200 employees, EA is going to unlock your ability to find more time and find more energy. Look, I don't want to take too much away from this episode before we jump in because there's so much great things. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get online with Helani. All right, guys, here we are back with Trades Talk. Today we have Helani Ellis with Exceptional Admins. Really excited to have her on the show. Helani, welcome this morning.
So pumped to be here, excited about the topic that runs through my veins, so passionate about executive administration. And I'm excited about the conversation because your audience has a lot of questions. Quite honestly, a lot of people around the globe have questions. So I'm looking forward to shedding light on answers to those question marks that are floating in the leaders, executives, and business owners' minds. So thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure, absolutely. And one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on today's show is I have a lot of experience and influence, and I talk with a lot of people in the tech industry. And this idea of an executive assistant or executive admin is very common. Almost every CEO of a startup has it. However, in the trades industry, specifically large companies, there's no real talk about admins or EAs to the CEO and executive team. So that's why we're going to dive in today and see if we can shed some light on that topic. Before we get in, if you can just give me a quick background of how you got into this industry, what pulled you in? You're in a very unique niche, I would say, and I'm excited to dive in. But give us a little background of how you fell into this.
If I were to look in the rearview mirror to see the last 25 years of everything I've touched, walked through, I could not tell you 25 years ago I'd be doing the quality and impactful work I'm doing today. But when I sit and think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything cascaded and compounded into what I'm doing today. And so I fell into executive administration in the late 90s. I'm 45. I'm always happy to admit my age. In the late 90s, by accident, I was staffed at the front desk as a receptionist, a celebrity who had a very high volume listening audience for an AM radio show. I caught her eye and she's like, hey, will you come be my executive assistant? Obviously, there's a lot more into that story. And when I started that role and I survived it 3 years, I use the word survive intentionally. I survived it 3 years. I was like, I was put on this earth because I'm so altruistic in my style to be of service. And so the main thing is I help individuals get a grip on their all-consuming workload. And that statement ties into when I moved to my next role as an executive assistant at the time, Dolby Laboratories, which was the sound technology company, right? Technology wasn't really a thing in sort of the late 90s, early 2000s as we see it in technology today here in 2024. And so did an amazing stint with that organization, really built out my suite of strengths, which is what I like to call your toolbox. Took a small stint doing the hardest job, one of the top 20 hardest jobs, raising my boys. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years doing that, still establishing, my identity, staying honed in on my strengths, ran a couple small side businesses. I do believe I'm an entrepreneur deep down. And then propelling to the future, took another admin role. I was in that role for 4 years, and I caught the eye of some of the executives I was working with here in Denver. I was living in Los Angeles at the beginning of the story, and here in Denver, and they're like, she gets the admin role different than I've ever seen before. I think a lot of that had to do with having the background in the entertainment industry, and just high level of hospitality, plus also navigating high net worth people. And
Yeah.
so took that role as an executive and personal assistant. I was the fourth hire, really did amazing things for 4 years with that executive, caught the eye of other executives, and they started asking me to help them find their administrative partner. And so very organically, I started doing some soft searches. And then one day I said to my executive, I said, something's going on here. And he and I just sat and we talked about it for probably about a half hour. He's like, I think you should explore this some more. So that summer, and I still give him credit today, he came up with the company name Exceptional Admins. And then the abbreviation is EA, like executive assistant. And so launch, I'm now in my seventh and a half year, and I'm in my eighth year. And it's been phenomenal supporting people such as the landscaping trade business. I had a wonderful
Yeah.
client in Boston. I'm based out of Denver. I work nationwide to, companies that are doing 170 billion with a B as in boy assets under management for real estate globally. So it's been a phenomenal journey. I'm not done, just getting started. And so I like to identify as a specialized headhunter.
I love that. And what an interesting story that is, but how you went from being that EA to then
Mm-hmm.
recruiting and helping to place EAs in these sounds like very important positions for very high
Mm-hmm.
net worth influential people.
Mm-hmm.
What was that moment when you realized this maybe I'm meant for more than just being the EA, but I'm actually meant to
Mm-hmm.
help grow and create this network of EAs. And I know at the fundamental level, you were not just placing and being a headhunter, but you were creating an entire ecosystem for EAs to advance their skill set. So what was that?
Mm-hmm.
Was there it sounded like you were kind of in the summer and there was that aha moment, the light bulb went off with your partner
Mm-hmm.
there, but maybe tell us a little more about that transition.
So, fun story. The executive that really helped propel made an introduction to an individual who just had won the Super Bowl. So, I'll just say that without saying
There
any
we go.
names. And this individual now needs, a personal executive assistant because he's going to be launching like a whole bunch of different things. So, when I had that meeting with that now Super Bowl ring holder, I thought, what's going on here? And then I had another introduction, which was one of my very first searches. Their last name is a large store retailer that we all shop at. That name, and I sat in front of them and I thought, something magnificent is going on here. There's a need for not recruiting, and recruiting is like a resume farm, right? Everyone has that cow cattle number on their ear. Whereas, where is that high touch? Because, as you've learned, and some of your listeners who may have had visibility into a really strong admin, it is life changing. And it
Hmm.
is so much more important than just, which slight tangent, all admin styles have a purpose, but the work that I do, right, the company's exceptional, not good admins. The work that I do is really diving into the talents and skills and passions of the admin and how that lifts up a leader for them to expand. And so when I had those two introductions and then really started noticing that I had a higher calling, it was literally, as I said in my sort of opening bio, it runs in my veins, and it runs in my veins in helping people get a grip on that all consuming workload, whether it was when I was in EA, and then training admins now. And for the training component, there is a teachable spirit in this profession that, by the way, is the minority and in the sense of
Okay.
count. And when I was having candidate screens looking for admin candidates for my clients, it was very natural to get to candor quickly. I got them, right? I've had those very unique, I've got a black book of stories. Maybe I'll publish it someday, but I've had those unique requests of, things that make people's mouths drop. And I've heard also those amazing stories as well. But one thing that kept coming through in the first and second year of running exceptional admins was, where's the development for us? I'm craving more. And so I started paying higher attention to that appetite. And it really came down to, I'm having thousands of calls. I'm receiving a wealth of knowledge that is candid and raw and systematic. And I thought, I need to continue to build out this library of knowledge and start, not gatekeep the information, but share it with them. One of the things I was known for as an admin was just a huge advantage for me that I still leverage today as an entrepreneur is divergent thinking, right? Very unconventional. We hear think outside of the box. I'm like, okay, once you get outside of the box, what do you do? And so the divergent thinking of healthy and creative disruption just continues to be me. And so with that, the education I give to teams, admin teams, when I go on site to train admins, or when I'm doing a one-on-one with admin, more importantly, an executive plus their admin, really bringing in unconventional future of work recommendations to truly optimize how everyone is moving throughout their day so they can achieve more.
Gosh, I love that. I love that idea of you realized there's this access to information that you are getting that is so unique and so one of a kind. And historically, I imagine in your industry, this industry of high net worth individuals, administrative assistants, personal assistants, confidentiality is top of the list. So there's got to be such little sharing that happens
Mhm.
between EAs and other EAs because of this idea of confidentiality. You don't want to go out and start telling these stories that you've been hired literally to not talk about. So
Right.
you realized there was this need to share the information, fundamentally share the information
Mhm.
with the industry that I don't know if anyone realizes there is an industry of executive assistants and a
Oh,
network of
yeah. How much
executive
time do we have?
assistants,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to kind of get into some of the meat of this. And
Mm.
I think there's a few people listening. I think there's an owner who's running a small company who thinks, man, one day I'll get big enough to hire an executive assistant.
Mhm.
There's the overwhelmed owner who's doing 10, 20, maybe more million a year and
Mm.
is like, gosh, I really need this EA. And then I think there's another listener out there who's maybe thinking about becoming an EA, or maybe they already are an EA and they're looking
Mhm.
for some takeaways from us. So I want to make sure we talk to those three different types of listeners.
Yeah.
I kind of want to start with the first one. Like, all right, you're running a company, maybe you have 15, 20 employees in the peak season, and you're like, there's no financial way I can hire an EA. I'm overwhelmed. That's just what it
Mm.
is to be an entrepreneur. So let's talk about that myth and that idea of when is it the right time to bring on an executive assistant or an executive admin?
I have a couple things competing at the tip of my tongue on what I want to share first. It's almost sort of that immediate buy-in. And it's this statement. If you don't have an assistant, you are also the assistant. On top of being the CEO, the
Yes.
visionary, the disruptor, the motivator. I mean, just imagine. And by the way, that's also a person with a 50 person team. And so I'll make that declaration here, right? If you don't have one, you're it. And by the way, if you're listening and you heard that and you're like, well, I delegate some other things to my COO or my ops person, we kind of have a receptionist, I sort of use them. That is the catalyst to really then decide how much more could you achieve with this person
Yes.
helping you. And so I'll say that up front. And I don't know whose chest that thumped, but I hope many. But the big thing is like when to do it. Well, first off, this is a great story, right? A real estate broker, solopreneur, one person, a part of like a bigger brand like Keller Williams or some of those other brands, Sotheby's and stuff, doing 60 million in residential real estate. In the ears of our listeners, they might say, "Oh, does that person really need an assistant?" He can achieve so much more with an assistant, right? So that should be the theme here in my what will be a decent answer. The theme is, do you have an assistant? And if you don't, you are the assistant. So this broker, 60 million residential transactions, is probably like 40, maybe 30 transactions a year in the higher end market of Denver. He gets an assistant. He has work-life harmony now, which is my replacement term for work-life balance. So he has that now. He's able to focus also on his own side hustle, which is some of his renovations that he does or building out his portfolio of properties that he has. So he's bought back, which I haven't said yet, time, but he's bending time, which is something I like to talk about. He's bending time in his favor to achieve more. So that's almost like kind of the whole answer with those different things. When you think as a listener, should I do it? When is it time? The time is also when you've caught yourself doing the things that you are not interested in. And so if I were on a keynoting stage and I said to the audience, by a raise of hands, who loves admin work? How many, unless it's an admin audience, clearly,
Right.
if it's an executive entrepreneur room full of people, no one, maybe one would, but we don't. Why not delegate that to someone who craves those responsibilities? So, kind of a sub answer is also like the financials. Like, when do I do it? I worked with a leader. He had 4 million in, and now he's tripled for he's in the roofing industry. He developed an app for roofing, working with all the municipalities across the entire nation. And he needed an admin or an operations person to help him get to that next vision to make it actually come to life. And so, but he was a roofing business, so trade, right? And so for that, he hired an executive assistant, but he was only having 3 million in revenue. So where is the math, right? It's all about the math. Now, a lot of people ask, should I have a part-time person? I think great. I'll tell you now, though, the minute that you do it is super fast to bring them full-time. Second, should I offshore? I have a personal opinion, so I'll say I'm uncomfortable with that. Confidentiality, as you mentioned earlier, like it's only you're sort of using your iPhone to its fullest capability. You're using it 1/10 because it's $8 an hour, but what are you really getting? And then there's the training and onboarding, and all of a sudden this firm has decided to, swap out Helani for Julie, and you got to start all over. So that's my opinion on that. But if it helps you leverage some additional time to scale, fine. But know that it's short term, by the way. Going full time and financially what that looks like, I would like to try to avoid salaries here because they're all over the map right now, especially with inflation and everything. But really thinking about, and here's math for my math people. What do you make an hour? And if you audited how many hours you're spending on administrative tasks, it's expensive. I'll just give you the back of the envelope. It's expensive. And it's not to say that admins are cheap because it's a terrible word to use them, but they're more cost effective and they love the work. They love the work. So why not? If you go out to eat at a restaurant, you're delegating cooking. It's the same thing. If you have a housekeeper, a landscaper, your business, Justin, you're hiring Justin to come in and do something amazing for you because you've delegated that out. It's the same thing. If you're delegating other things, the delegation to an admin is highly powerful.
Wow, I love, you made so many points there. And the one that obviously stuck out the most for me because my mentor, Derek, who also got me into having an executive assistant, has the same quote: if you don't have an assistant, you are one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you really talk about this idea of what could you accomplish if you weren't bogged down with all the admin work. And I want to take it a step further. Time is such an amazing resource that we all have, and we all have the same amount. However, there's this idea of energy when we are consistently doing work that we don't love. We reach that point of burnout and check out so much quicker. I can say it. I have worked recently, just this week, Monday, Tuesday. I worked anywhere from 14 to 16 hours. I was in my absolute flow state. I was loving what I was doing. We were meeting till 11 o'clock at night on Monday, and I was doing things I love. Now, if I'm doing admin work and everything else around 5 or 6 o'clock, I'm asking myself, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm ready to put the computer away. I just think we need to look beyond the time recovery that we're going to get with the admin and look to what are those ideas that are in your head that are floating around, and how much better could your company be? Could your life be? Could the people around you become if you were able to actually put some of those into action? Take them from your head and your idea book, put them into action. What are you thinking?
Well, first off, I want to know, are you a fly on the wall? Because the chapter of the leadership book that I am currently writing, the first chapter is called Bending Time. And I talk about time scarcity versus time abundance. And I'm also a huge messaging tool. And so here's a quote that I would love to be known for. Energy currency is the new wealth. And when you think, you like that? Energy currency is the new wealth. Yeah. I close every chapter in my upcoming book with a quote from me. And so and I started with Bending Time because, as you said, that second hand keeps pulling you into the future every day without your permission. And so what are you doing to really capitalize on each 60 seconds? And so I love to give, which you missed my presentation when I came to Monterey, and I talk about the power of 60 seconds within time. And I talk about if you all got on the floor and held a plank for 60 seconds. And I say 60 because it's a significant number over the number 1. So instead of saying 1 minute, you say 60 seconds. And then if you hold a plank on the floor, which by the way, experimentation has proven that if you and I were doing that right now and we were carrying a conversation, right about 27 seconds, we'd be saying, gosh, how much longer? And it's still more than half the time. And so when you really connect with the power of what 60 seconds truly feels like, you then start to have self-control with your energy. And to your beautiful story, which by the way is in my decision fatigue chapter, where I talk about if you have the interest, you will find the energy. Let me say that again. If you have the interest, you will find the energy. And so, to your great example, these executives who don't have a grip on their all consuming workload, they're finding extra energy, which is tied to friction on how they feel about their work performance. Because darn it, I have to do this and I don't want to. There's a seventh email to reschedule that appointment, which is so important. And so I tie energy and interest very nicely, actually, in the book. And when I keynote and do facilitation for leaders with their leadership teams, we talk about what's your interest and what does that look like, and how interest drains, meaning subtracts, and how interest adds to your energy, which you have full control over, because energy currency is a new wealth.
I love that quote. Energy currency is the new wealth. It totally connects with me because I try to be very conscious and intentional about how I spend my time, and I'm consistently trying to, I guess review is the best word, but I try to analyze, my last week. I look at my
Mm,
calendar. I sit down with my admin and we go
hmm
over, hey, was this a productive week? And it's funny,
mm.
this morning I took the dogs for a walk, and I'm walking and I'm thinking about that question as we're recording this on a Friday. And I'm like, this might have been one of my best weeks so far. And I
Sweet.
feel so good about where I spent my time. And I think back, I go, oh, I still have a ton of admin stuff. It doesn't completely go away, right? You still have to do a little bit of,
Well, I'm
connecting
hoping
and,
the
and what have you.
assistant starts that front end and you take it to the finish line, right? Like,
100%.
and that's kind of maybe another question is sort of like, what does that cadence look like, Helani? Illuminate my
Yeah.
imagination to tell me what I'm missing out on.
I want to be completely honest and in
Yeah.
this podcast and let you guys know that are listening. Like, I am still struggling with this idea of work-life harmony, with
Mm,
getting the admin up to speed and to a point that I can let go. And
yeah.
so I would love to dive into that question. Like,
Surety.
where
Sure.
is that handoff? What's the handoff? How do you interact when there's 200 to 300 emails coming in every day to your CEO inbox? How do you decide what you handle, what that person handles, and what's the cadence of communication there?
So I'm going to use you as a great example. I've only
Perfect.
emailed once or twice with your Justine. Is that her? No, maybe I got that.
Actually, I'm full
Oh,
transparency. I'm in between admins right now, but I do have an admin that is starting, and his name's
okay.
Drew. And by the time
Cool.
this comes out and is published, he'll be on board. So
Okay.
he'll be listening
So
to this.
I'm going to give you a little bit of help here. So what does that
I love
cadence
it.
look like? Day 30, 60, and 90, those days are nothing but transferring knowledge. It's a hang up where energy is going to be overly expended by you. But if you give off the opportunity to transfer knowledge in the beginning, you get at that 6 month, 7th month mark, that anticipatory forecasting into the future for you, coming with recommendations versus problems only. They cannot, so they show up to you with zero jump drive of information. And so it's
Mhm.
totally on you to transfer that knowledge, which if we're going to, increase our golf game or lose 20 pounds, there's an entire planning process. And so the planning process is knowing up front, I'm transferring knowledge, because they then can read my mind, which is everything in the top 3 things that the executive wants. So in the first 30 to 60, 90 days, it's clunky. They will make a mistake. You will not, have the right patience one day to transfer that knowledge because, quote, you are in a time scarcity zone in the day or in the week, depending on what you have going on. So constantly thinking of the power of 60 seconds and how time abundance is your focus. One is a leader. And so I can't wait to send you the book. It's going to come out in
Yeah.
hopefully
Oh, I can't
first
wait.
quarter of next year. Yeah. The next thing, and we'll use sort of the 2-year example when you've had someone, which I'm also going to
Okay.
tie this to a part that I wanted to mention earlier. The ROI on an admin, the biggest argument I get, and I'm still kind of talking about cadence because I want really people to recognize they're not a salesperson, so they don't bring in revenue. But you're the salesperson, you're the visionary, you're the development person out in the field. You're also making higher money than a standard salesperson because you are the face of the business. And so if you have that time, which we want to call energy, but energy plus time to actually go out and do more development, growth, disruption, exploratory. You truly are making money through more effort with you, which, by the way, the word interest, we said earlier, you're interested in doing all of that. So there's an argument often that I hear of like, Helani, they don't make money on the bottom line. It's always red because it's always just an expense. I'm like, what is your time worth? Which now for me, it's always, what is your energy worth? What is your work-life harmony? When was the last time you were with your partner somewhere? When were you like really on vacation and like totally clocked out by the pool at 11 o'clock, half asleep, right? Like when did that really happen for you?
Yes.
Yeah. So tying into sort of like what that cadence looks like, and this is also in my book, change capacity. If you
Okay.
have low change capacity, meaning you enjoy complacency, this is your way, you don't want to change it because you're comfortable, which, by the way, another chapter is called status quo, which is not always great, right? How do we take and move you from a low change capacity to high change capacity for the huge ROI later? And so thinking about, I'm exhausted already, I'm onboarding this new person, I'm going to fast forward to year one. They know what you do. They know how you write. They know why you make the way you make decisions. They're then looking at that 200 or 300 emails. They're creating the reply drafts already for you. You go in, change 2 words, hit send. Or they'd come up and said, hey, you've been in offsites visiting your landscaping customers all day. Here's a debrief from the day so that you're up to speed. Having that pulse for you back at the office, which for the trade people, as you mentioned, what does that look like? Now, trust is huge, and that could be actually an entire conversation. A lot of executives say, I have an admin now. I can't delegate. I don't trust them. I'm so sorry. I don't ever want someone to lose a job, but it's time to get someone else. Number one, how do you find and discover trust in an interview? It's asking questions like, what does the first 30 days look like? You're asking the candidate that, which, by the way, if you still have another round of interviews, go ahead and take that question and ask them. If they can speak to a position of strategy versus, well, Justin, I'd love for you to tell me how you want to spend the first 30 days. That's a good admin for like a very large bank that still keeps them like a secretary. If someone says, well, I'm going to watch what you do, look at your calendar, ask you why you only met Hilani once in the last 60 days, they're strategy thinkers. And that's really where the power and ROI comes back. Again, the second brain, which is a copy of your brain. And then I love that you said work-life harmony. I do want to highlight that. We live in such a fast moving, evolving landscape of business. And we can never truly get a grip, which is why I like to say, how would you like to have somewhat of a grip? And with an admin and better work style strategies that I love to deploy when I'm working with teams, you literally start to bend time and achieve more to boost productivity and also boost revenue. Boost revenue. So if all of your listeners are excited about revenue goals, they're ambitious, regardless of what's going on in the nation, why not grab and go for it? And it does require having that partner in the admin box on your org chart.
Totally agree. And I think there's this opportunity to disrupt and grow and become the next big plumbing company or roofing or landscape company in your market. And this is what our vision has been and continues to be, is this idea of raising the bar in the landscape industry. And when you want to not just do great work and create a great culture and make a lot of money, those are great activities and objectives as a company. But when you want to actually try to change an industry and you want to spearhead and pioneer the next generation of what trades businesses are, which I think a lot of our listeners have that mission, however they articulate it, you are not going to be able to get outside of the box of great customer service, creating great culture, and making a lot of money. Those are great things, but that is not where it stops for so many people that I talk to. They want to have an impact. They want to create a legacy. And I hired my first EA 2 years ago in July. So it'll be, by the time this launches,
almost
it'll be
exactly
2 years.
2 years. Yeah.
We're just over 10 million in revenue. And our trailing 12 months right now is a little over 20 million. So in the last,
Stop.
right? Yeah. And we went from 1 to 10 million from, in about 6-7 years. And then the last 2 years, we doubled from 10 to 20. And not only have we doubled, which is so awesome. And we're on the very beginning of our growth trajectory. But what's so cool about that is I personally can say today, I feel better about my time. I feel better about my energy. I'm in the visionary spot. I'm doing the things I love. I write a column for Lawn and Landscape magazine. I do this podcast.
Nice.
Like, I'm a pilot. I do all this stuff has happened in the last 2 years. And when you look at my life, today versus 2 years ago, not only will you see the company has doubled, but you'll see all
Mhm.
these other things, these activities and hobbies that I've started to incorporate in my life,
Yeah. Yeah.
which tie into my bigger purpose of raising the bar in the landscape industry and helping people achieve success they didn't think was possible. So
Mhm.
I am living that story of disruption and energy allocation outside
Mhm.
of the normal day in and day out, creating great culture, creating great customer service, and making a lot of
Mhm.
money. There's so much more out there. And that's, I think, what the EA helps you achieve.
I wanna highlight you said the word legacy, which was crazy because literally 3 seconds before you said it, I wrote it down. And I'm gonna bring up something powerful in just a second, but I wanna highlight here for all of our listeners, the and listen, Justin has it hard, right? He's still hustling, he's not coasting, he's not the chairman of the business, he's still the face of the business. He's designed a work style that is 70% on purpose and 30% impact purpose. I have to do it. I want to do it because I know what the return will be if I invest in that. The risk reward, right? And so at any given point, the 70 might turn to 30% on purpose and 70%, BS. And so if you want to think about, and this is where work-life harmony comes into what I like to talk about with leaders, work and life need to integrate, right? They need to flow together because we never are able to balance. And the example I give is imagine in both hands, I have a jar of sand in each. And just by the naked eye, it looks like both glass jars are holding about the same amount of sand. One glass jar represents work, one represents life. And so if we were to pour those out onto a scale to balance, right? Equal
Yep.
balance, it's impossible. But if we thought about the figure eight, creating that harmony where there's ups and downs, we come to the intersection of a sweet spot where, just as you said, 14-hour days, but you were loving what you were doing. How do we create this synergy where both work and life integrate because we can never balance them? So you were describing what I love to call the 70-30 lifestyle. You have 70% of really on purpose, exciting. You've subtracted because you delegated, by the way, which is the whole point of the admin. You said legacy. I heard an amazing poem, and I'm just going to paraphrase it here. And this is actually the last chapter of my book. So it's a great
Okay.
tease. A woman by the name of Linda Ellis, which my last name is Ellis, she and I are not related just by coincidence. And she has a poem that talks about the dash. And in the opening of chapter 8 of 8 chapters in my book, I'll kind of illuminate the imagination here. Imagine that we're standing together and it's 6:30 a.m. and we are at Arlington Cemetery. And we can see off in the distance all of the white headstones. There's a beautiful breeze blowing through. The sun is just coming up. And every headstone has a beginning, the dash, and then the end. That dash represents something so magnificent that right now, as you think about what you just said, you are creating the stories within your dash. And what does that look like as a leader who's writing those articles for the industry that you know, who's doing this podcast to provide this information to your listeners? All of that ties into which would be your legacy. And so when you're a leader and you think about like how you want to make people feel, how you want them to experience you, which ties a little bit into branding as a leader, what does your dash say about Justin? And so every day when you make a decision to decide to have that assistant and, hey, you know what, Helani, I'm going to delegate 30% to you, just kind of get the vision of what you think I'm thinking dialed in on a document. And then schedule a 30-minute and let's discuss it, which by the way is usually a tip I like to give leaders to start building that trust. And so they can't mess it up. They're not doing anything to the outside. And they're also telling you how much they understand the way that your brain operates. All of that ties to legacy, work-life harmony, scaling from 10 million, which by the way, that's so amazing, to 20 million. And it's possible. And I would really love for leaders to know that you don't have to do it alone. You hire the ops, you hire the field people, the project managers. Who do you have for you? And that's really where it comes into the admin hire is transformative, not just for your life, but truly the trajectory of your business.
Wow, that was a powerful story. You really took me there at that cemetery. Like I was literally there watching the sun come up. That was really powerful. There's so much behind this idea. I think a lot of people tuned into this podcast thinking they were going to hear about, how to hire an executive assistant or something. But what
Mhm.
we're realizing as we unpack this discussion is so much bigger than that. It's not just your company, it's your life. You mentioned
Yeah.
something that really hit me, which is you didn't say this exact words, but I know this is probably a quote you use. It's lonely at the top. When you're the owner, CEO, and this goes even down to like a VP level, even some director levels, depending on the company. It
Mhm.
just when you're at the top of an organization or even just the top of a team,
Mhm.
you have to show up with that positive, confident, never failing mindset and just make that stand every single day at work. And then you come home and you go to your wife or your husband or your spouse and
Mhm.
you start to
Spent.
complain and
Totally
talk.
spent.
You're spent. Yeah, not only do you not
Yeah.
have energy, but you're trying to bring them into your life because you have no one at work to talk to.
Yeah.
And I think this EA type of position not only helps you so much in your life and everything else, I mean, I can speak from experience, it helps you in your relationship because
Mm.
now you're so much more present.
Mm.
You're not
Mm.
having to go home and vent. You
We're
have someone that,
saving marriages. I'm
yes,
gonna
we're
declare that
saving
here. And
marriages.
relationships that haven't put the ring on it. Yes, we are saving
Yes.
lives.
We're making progress. And that's so
Yeah.
cool. And I think that's a point that we shouldn't skip over. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. I was known as the advisor, especially because I, transferred that knowledge, right? Acquired that knowledge. And so I'll give kind of some tips for anyone that's interested. By the way,
Yeah,
you can find me
perfect.
on my website, exceptionaladmins.com. Happy to have a call with you after listening to this. But we become an advisor, and you mentioned lonely at the top. And so I'd like to actually give behind the scenes of the admin as well. We have a saying in
Yes.
the admin profession, we live on an island. We live on an island, right? And we live on it because of the confidentiality. I mean, people know when marriages aren't working, when someone's possibly got a cancer scare, we're scheduling colonoscopies, we
Yeah.
really, we know social security numbers, it's all these things. And so there's also this loneliness for the admin because they cannot share with other admins, and some of them do, and that's where it actually gives the collective audience of admins bad names, bad raps, right? Like a car salesman, mattress salesman, right? Hopefully none of our listeners are those. Sorry if you are, I don't mean to insult. In the admin profession, there's a lot of pressure, especially on LinkedIn, to get a seat at the table. And that's to like be informed, be seen as more. And I'm like, I actually am disrupting that. I don't want you to have a seat at the table because I want you to get work done back at your desk. But when Justin comes back to the office and I walk in following him going, how did that go? Do you feel like it was productive? What was missing? What was the best part about it? I'm getting that immediate FaceTime with you. And I'm also getting your raw thoughts after, which are going to help me serve you the rest of the day if it was, excuse me, shitty. And
Hmm.
then if it was amazing, okay, he's got extra energy. I've got two hot questions I can ask him now because he's firing on all cylinders and I need to get what I need. And so getting that immediate access, which is to your point about the loneliness, it is lonely. I'm a business of two and a half. I have a part-time marketing person, full-time assistant, which by the way, I'm not with that many zeros like you, could be one day, but I knew the value of my life and the trajectory I wanted to take the business and the expansion. I hired an assistant in my fourth year to be my first hire. And it's been transformative of being able to do one, write this book and all these other things I've got on the timeline for the future. But when I can call her and say, hey, what do you think of that call with that client? We're having a dialogue. That to me is priceless versus truly feeling alone. And even if you have a staff of 10, as I just described, Justin's coming out of the meeting. I'm respectfully, right on your
Right.
coattails, following you in there. Also checking your body language. Does he even want me to follow him in? Or sometimes my executive would say, come into my office. I knew exactly what we were doing. I had my notepad, my pen. I was listening. He had ideas, things he didn't bring up in the meeting because he didn't want to derail the meeting, right? And so there's so much about this role that is advisor, which, by the way, in this profession, as I mentioned earlier on the minority, not all of them operate this way, which is the beauty of the work that I do of really dialing into the style of the admin and how, which I'm known here in Denver as the CEO assistant matchmaker, how you're matching styles and synergies and energy levels. And also, some of my clients have come out and said, I need someone to tell me what to do. I'm like, darn it, I'm out of the market. I'm not available for hire, but I'll find someone similar to me that can have a healthy breath of command with you to keep you on track. And some leaders need that and they want that. And they want that because they know that they can, as a visionary, fly off and just kind of, go too visionary and not be focused on the needs of that 30% in their enjoyment of their job, of the stuff that they do need to get done.
Yeah. I love how you pulled the blinds back there and gave us a look into the admin perspective
Yeah.
because there's so much more than answering emails and scheduling meetings and taking phone calls. Like you said,
Mhm.
it's advisement. And it's not
Mhm.
just advisement in your typical form that you would think about it. It's reading body language. It's knowing the timing. It's knowing when to ask what questions, when to not, maybe more importantly, when to not ask other questions.
I knew when my executive was hangry. So lunch was a lot earlier that day. But yeah, the body language,
Yeah,
it's powerful. Being an advisor is a
that's
really big
awesome.
deal.
I love that. We've covered so much, and I feel like we could totally do a Joe
We
Rogan
could
here
do
together.
another one. Yeah. Mhm.
We can do hours, and maybe we will, right?
Mhm.
Guess if you're listening, please, give us some feedback on this.
Yes,
Reach out
please.
to Hilani, whether it's through her website. I know you're very active on LinkedIn. Go follow
Mhm.
her. You're going to get a bunch of great info.
Thank you.
But before we wrap, Hilani, we always do this idea of a trade secret, and we talked a little
Mm.
bit about this earlier.
Yeah.
So I want to get your trade secret. You've given us so many nuggets and key takeaways, but what's something we can end this episode on that's really going to leave everyone excited?
It's a Benjamin Franklin quote, and I'll say it twice because it's only a few words and it's powerful. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. There's a lot that can be interpreted with that. And if I thought about the year in which Benjamin Franklin existed, the 1700s, it's extremely powerful to realize we're still facing similar things, but what are we doing with that? And so as you dive in and maybe you hit play on this conversation twice because you were listening to it when you were driving and now you're back, or on a plane flight and you want to write down some of the golden nuggets as you put it down. Are you preparing truthfully for the trajectory that you are excited about? And does that prepare include an advisor, that admin hire? Does that prepare include a part-time admin hire? And if you have an admin now, and you're hearing this conversation and you're thinking, we have a chance to evolve the way that we work, we need to do that. Does that admin have a teachable spirit? And do you have the change capacity that's necessary to experience healthy friction that comes from updating yourself, right? Our cell phones get updates on a regular basis. When was the last time you actually updated your work style and that of those on your team, including your admin?
And that's really the two components that you need to accomplish great things and continue to make progress: a willingness to change and a teachable style. You have
Yeah.
those two things, you can accomplish amazing, amazing achievements. So, Helani, I appreciate you so much. What a great episode this has been. So many takeaways, not just for me, but I think our listeners. And I really appreciate your time.
So excited to be here. I'm so glad you asked me. And thank you. And everyone, it's achievable. It really is. And the scaling that you want to achieve is just on the horizon.
It's right there. And stay tuned. When your book launches, we've got to have you back on the show.
Yes, that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.